I'm pleased to introduce GarethDylanSmith. The reformed clarinetist, London-based GarethDylanSmith, drummer, recently played for acclaimed productions of musicals Curtains, The Fix, and Parade. He's equally at home with sleazoid garage prog punks, The Eruptors, and other more nuanced artists, including Stephen Wheel, Solid Citizen, Gillian Glover, and multi-artist phenomena Sweet Tooth. He teaches drumming, ensemble skills, popular music history, and research skills for the University of East London Institute of Contemporary Music Performance and Boston University. He writes for Drummers Magazine, Rhythm, Dr. Drum's blog, and is editor at Startup SUS Music. Gareth's research interests include intersections of popular musicianship, higher education, entrepreneurship, gender, and narrative. Please welcome GarethDylanSmith.
Quite a bio. Sounds like something I would write. So, welcome. Thank you for waiting. I apologise for being late. It was more rock and roll that way. Yes, indeed. Challenging narratives in popular music education. But first, actually, I need my iPad. 1 second. Here it is. No, where is it? Here it is. Okay. But first, narratives in popular music, because popular music education wouldn't really work without this. I'll be reading for a moment. This is actually a photo of me from here 4 years ago. Broadly similar. Okay, so narratives from mainstream media are often reductive and sometimes wholly misleading, such as when NME Music Magazine in 2002 announced the New Rock Revolution. I recall my disbelief at the allegation that a handful of bands selected for coverage by a high-profile publication were suddenly rediscovering and reinventing a genre that had been alive and well since its inception. As far as I, along with the scores of people I frequently encountered on London's less well-publicised rock scene, was concerned, there was no revolution, just a shift in the attention of the mainstream media to a style that had been ignored for a season while indie bands, divas, and Welsh musicians were flavour of the day. Similarly, the most important acts while shaping music today, Q Magazine 2011, included hip-hop artists, alternative rock artists, and a particularly high level of attention being paid to folk musicians, Laura Marling and Mumford & Sons. These artists are not unworthy of attention, but they're neither of the dozens, scores, or hundreds of comparably good acts. I and many of my peers have been playing folk music for over 20 years, and will continue to do so long after the cameras have turned elsewhere for the next new style that will likely have long pre-existed and will long outlast the fickle media hype. Narratives such as these are typical of what Hoskins in 2012 describes as the mainstream media's propensity for deification and demolition. Build them up and knock them down. When I teach undergraduate music history, I begin by telling my students that I will not be giving them an accurate or complete history. Notions of popular, music, and history are so complex that to attempt to fool students that I could comprehensively fill them in on the details would be arrogant at best. I'm always very nervous to canonize and to reify songs, albums, artists, genres, movements, and events that we discuss, although I realise that by discussing them, I risk canonizing them all the more, in the minds of one undergraduate class after another. At best, I can aim to augment students' existing, usually substantial, knowledge of music that has gone before, and my main task, perhaps, to encourage them to question the histories and narratives that they encounter. I discussed with the class our inevitable ignorance of the majority of music being made in the world, or even just in London at the present, and, by extension, the futility of trying to identify a definitive history of popular music. Popular music studies prevailing discourse risks misconstrued by students and the public as reflective of popular music in the present, when it is distinctly at odds with the reality for musicians making the vast majority of the world's popular music today, i.e. the very ways in which popular music is popular in the 21st century. Okay, so, now he's gone. So popular music education. I think there are broadly two kinds. There's popular music performance education, and then there's education in popular music studies. Now, I teach a lot of popular music performance, and all of my performance students have to do a bit of popular music studies, a bit of critical analysis of what it is, the tradition they're involved with. But I don't think, in many popular music studies courses, you're required also to be in a band and properly engage with that side of things. So, maybe you should. I am a member of the International Association for the Study of Popular Music, the UK in the Ireland branch. And there was the newsletter was reinvented about 6 months ago. It came round, and there was an announcement that they would be interviewing people from the other side of the fence every month. The other side of the fence being people who play music. I thought, what are you talking about? I thought, fence? I went, fence? What fence? The whole reason I'm involved in this in the first place is because I play the music, teach the music, and want to know more about it. That's what this is. So to illustrate my point, there are some photos of me coming up. Look, this is me doing what I do. Animal, the icon of drum in the world. And that's the classic overbite. It's either that or my mouth wide open. And all the the business communities seem to be writing about this a lot. Peter Glaw's book, Swarm Creativity, he talks about coins, collaborative innovation networks, talking about business, but he uses music as a model of how people are interacting and collaborating and being entrepreneurial with their lives to help businesses. He works at MIT. And Richard Sennett's book, Together, this is a sociological, he works at the London School of Economics, and he's also a former conductor and cellist. So he's got a kind of business, sociological, musical head on his shoulders. Very, very interesting guy. But you have to kind of turn to this economics business literature often to find stuff that talks about most popular music, my experiences of it. This is a startup that I'm involved with, and SOS Music. It says what it is there. It's an altruistic, collaborative peer community that champions and promotes craftsmanship and contemporary music. It's incredibly new, and I can't tell you much more about it than that. But we spent a long time trying to distill this sentence. Because this seems to be something like this, we think, me and my colleague Attar, who set this up, we seem to think this might be the kind of thing that will hopefully spread the word about the most popular music that's going on. We need something to share it. So maybe a collaborative peer community championing itself would be good. There's just the two of us at the moment, it's a bit self-indulgent, but when it gets really big, we want there to be thousands of people involved eventually, because no one's paying attention to most of what's going on, not even the Houses of Parliament, which really should be, in my opinion, because I voted for them. And I pay taxes. Okay, so there is this great book, 2004, Stephen Cottrell, A Professional Music Making in London. He looks at, as you might expect, with a title like that, professional musicians in London and how they work and what their lives look like. And you find, as you might expect, a kind of portfolio, protein career going on. Dawn Bennett's book is a 2008 really, really interesting book. She tries to redefine musician. Musician isn't just someone who performs, isn't just someone who writes music. It can be, that's probably a prerequisite to do something like that, but you also do loads of other things. And you're still a musician when you're maybe working as a driving instructor, or maybe teaching a class, whatever, that's still part of being a musician. It doesn't need discounting. And this great book here, Preparing for Success, came out last year, published by 2 authors living in London, and that's aimed at undergraduate students to help them kind of figure out what might be some options for their careers, and show you what one could look like. It's, of course, out of date, because it's published last year, written the year before, so it's actually already of no use, almost. No, the things change too fast, don't they? You know, it's the kind of thing we need to be doing, I think. Have a read of this, from Haley Party's amazing doctoral dissertation. Let you ruminate on that. I love this. Her dissertation, if you haven't read it, is incredible. I thought it was amazing. It's like Dewey, 100 years later. I like this. That's what Ismay says. And Nafmi says this. They aim to do this. But this kind of thing seems to be at odds with the narratives we're getting from people. Like, why would you? It's not really congruent with what we're seeing, for how music is celebrated. When the national government in the UK says, where are the musicians of the future coming from? This is not addressed in that kind of discussion. So Haley Party says we should think about the school as an institution that guides people towards increasing agency, not increasing musicianship, not increasing proficiency as musicians, but this is the aim, perhaps. So, I was wondering if there might be differences between these things. Success in music, through music and with music. I'm not entirely sure how they might be different, but they probably are. And I think the top one is what is celebrated all the time, isn't it? The celebration of success in music. But actually it's not really, because as Carlos was saying earlier on, what is success? I mean, no one really knows what that is. Commercial success, maybe. There's a lot of celebration of that. But that's often to be commercially successful. You don't have to be brilliant at what you're doing, really, do you? From a music point of view. Chris Martin from Coldplay was born the same day as me, and he's made a lot more money out of music. But I'm better than his drummer. If you're well, no, maybe not. I don't have the stamina, because he does this all the time, doesn't he? Goodness sake. I mean, I don't have the time. So maybe I'll never achieve the top one. So, what are they thinking? certain is that it will not follow the patterns of the first 100 years of commercially available recorded music, or the stories offered up by the mainstream media, and many scholarly studies that describe it. Success will be based upon involvement in collaborative innovation networks of all shapes and sizes. Institutions and organisations need to embrace a new, flexible, dynamic epistemology of popular music that incorporates real-life scenarios for multiple musicalities, narratives, and notions of success, I think. Now he's going to say something much cooler, because he is much cooler. This is Robert Glasper, who's just cooler than me. And he says this. I was just thinking, I was trying to, really clumsily, I tried to change this, and it changed it to this. If we could only say something like this. It's not nearly as neat, but then not nearly as cool. There they are.
We have some time for questions.
Thank you for not heckling. There are plenty of flaws in it, so you know. Joe?
Could you do the Coldplay drummer impersonation?
World champion, I do like your drumming, incidentally, it's good. Here. Joe? Roger?
So what's really the problem?
I think the problem is there's so much music going on that is not recognised and is not considered. People don't talk about it.
So I mean, I was almost going to cut in and stop you when you said there's so much music going on.
Yeah.
At which point I say, great, what's the problem?
Okay, right. Why draw attention to it? I think because. Okay, I think the problem stems from my insecurities as a music teacher. In that I'm teaching people who are at a music college playing popular music and they want to go somewhere with that. But statistically, they've got almost no chance of being noticed. And it's very hard to know at the moment what a career looks like. Because all the ideas that we receive from the media and from scholarly coverage as well about what a career in music looks like, they're all really famous people. Because there's only so many publications and so much room in them, etc., etc. So I'm concerned about what happens, where do people go, and how do you know if you've achieved success, if the kind of notions we receive of success are necessarily so limited. So the problem for me, it stems from teaching popular music. I'm thinking, I may look like success to my students, but I may not, because I'm not the success that you see kind of advertised. But I am probably their future, someone who kind of does a million things a week and pieces it all together and somehow still manages to earn an income through figuring it all out as I go along. But that's not what you tell students, that's not what we say is bumbling along for the rest of your life is how you'll achieve success. That's not considered, it seems contradictory to what we're told, is my non-concise answer. Does that even make sense?
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if you were sort of concerned vocationally, avocationally. I mean, it sounds like you're talking vocationally.
I think so.
But, I mean, if there's that much music going on, as you described, then I think it's wonderful.
It is wonderful, it is. Another problem I have, I think, is with the canon and this idea of canonizing music. Because you're necessarily going to miss most of it. And it just seems unfair. It seems like the wrong way to go about talking about things. I think we should perhaps do away with all that. The moment you start talking about a great band, there might be another great band. That, because they haven't written about them, if you've written about them 10 times, 100 times, and then you read all the articles, they become, reified as the Beatles are the best band ever. Well, they've had 60 years of coverage. You can't do that now, because it's today. So that's a joke.
Is some of what you're talking about, Gareth, that there's kind of a built-in lag time between the present as it's perceived and the actual present that comes from the context where most of us practice, which is an institutional context. So in a social, dynamic, non-institutional context, you still have hierarchies, you still have formal canons, you have serve an institution's purposes. So some of the things
Right.
that you brought up are about, or at least it seems that that's where the conflict is. Is that fair?
That's entirely fair, yeah. We've discussed this before, haven't we? I think it's entirely fair. I think, I mean, the Institute of Contemporary Music Performance, and necessarily most of what we do isn't that contemporary, because it was written already, and the students do an awful lot of music, even in a contemporary music school that's supposed to be right here and now. The students are all doing things that are tomorrow, you know, or next year as far as the curriculum is concerned. So I'm just underlining what I see as some problems, really. You know, thank you for being a shoulder to cry on. Yes.
Maybe this will fall under rubric of consolation. I wrote this big college textbook on the history of rock music. It's over 600 pages. I don't know how many pages it is if they took all the doggone pictures on it. But it's a long book. Still, I felt like I had to not talk about more music than I actually talked about. You're absolutely right. But even if you don't think about music that wasn't by famous people, even among the bands that were famous at the times, it's very, very difficult to figure out what you're going to talk about. And you try to do a balanced job. You try to give as fair and objective a picture as you can, and not write love letters to your own record collection, this kind of thing. But one thing that has occurred to me through this process of doing this and revising it is that when you teach a course in the history of any popular, any style, you're not even really, ultimate objective of the course is not actually the historical facts themselves. It's the ways in which we think about how we organize the historical facts. My students, 6 weeks after they take the final exam, will probably have forgotten many of the things that were on the exam in terms of the actual bits of knowledge. But I hope what they take away from it is the ways in which they saw me model, ways of processing all of this information and organizing. So when you think about it that way, it kind of really doesn't matter who gets included, because whoever gets included in the course most likely gets kind of forgotten anyway. What's important is how you process it, and you could have taken an entirely different group of bands.
I think that's entirely right. The problem I have with it then, though, is, because I teach the history of popular music, as I said, but I'm teaching it to people who want to be the future of popular music.
Right.
And if they know that they're probably going to be left out of a history class, which is maybe fine, but I'm wondering how do they think about the success? What does it mean for them to be successful? What do we need for them to think in that way? Is the other side of it. Yeah. I think I've taken up too much time than who's chairing? Johnny's your hand up.
I'm not sharing it.
I think the problem that we're looking at here is one of life in exponential change. In a period in which it's impossible to grab a hold of the present, because it's already the past by the time we get there, we're trying to prepare people for the future. And I think layered on top of that is our academic structures. I think more probably in the United States than in the UK, that in very strong ways maintain a kind of glories of the past, whether that past was the band movement in America of 1890s or whether it was earlier back in our conservatories and in colleges of music. And it's very disconcerting to people who are trying to work at the present, because there's an impossibility of getting there. And so what some technologists have suggested is that what we need to deal with is not try to get the information, but to simply have processes for managing and finding the information. And it might be things like your sus music that serve as that kind of a bridge to be able to do it. In other words, if there's all this music going on, but there's no way for people to connect, well, gosh, might they need a place to connect? And there are things, all the ideas for the internet haven't been thought of. YouTube isn't that old. And I'm just thinking that there will be things that are coming. They're going to help us to manage this flow, because right now it's impossible.
Yeah, and I think, I believe you, and I agree. But I find it hard to stand in front of a class of undergrad music students